When Pastor texted me about substituting for him today, he texted me that Allie, his daughter, was being babysat by neighbors, and that she asked the neighbors if they could bring her to church today, because if her dad couldn't do the sermon, she would do it. He thought you would get a kick out of that. I dug this sermon out. I did it once before here, but it was back in 2012. I seriously doubt anybody remembers anything I said then. So it's about perception. And, have you ever met somebody for the first time and you get a perception about them and you find out later on you were totally wrong about that person? It happens all the time. So this is about our perception of God, how we sometimes mess that up. And I wanted to give you a lot of examples this morning about that. So the first example, and this would be me this morning, there was a Jewish woman who was asked to fill in for her rabbi at synagogue, and she didn't really want to do it because the last time she had tried, she dropped a match on the carpet and started a small fire. So she was a little reluctant to do this, but she said, okay, I'll do it. And she met with everybody who was going to participate. She went over all the stuff she was supposed to do. She knew all the music, everything. But one thing she forgot to do was she forgot to go over the routine of the service. And you can tell I'm a little rusty on that this morning too. So what she did is she went to sit in the rabbi's chair, and she missed, and she hit the flag and almost dropped it. She had to catch it. So she got past that. Then she had to get the Torah out of the ark, because they pull that out every Sabbath. And what she had forgotten is that it was locked. So she had to go have somebody get a key to unlock the ark. Then she gets it out, and she's a very short woman, and she realizes she can't undo the ends of the Torah. So she had to call up somebody from the congregation to help her with that. And so when the person took the crowns off the Torah, the breastplate fell off the Torah and fell on the floor. It made all kinds of noise. So she thought to herself, well, there goes my perfect service. And afterwards, she went up to one of her friends and she said, well, that was really inspiring, wasn't it? And the friend said, well, actually, it was, because you're one of us. You're not a professional like the rabbi. So if you can get up there and do it, maybe we could do it sometime. So if I mispronounce a word, if I forget something, if I forget a song, if I forget the Lord's Prayer, please bear with me, because I'm one of you. So I wanted to read to you. We didn't do that. I'm going to read from the Message. I'm reading first Isaiah 40. If you want to look it up. Now, mine will be very different because it's the Message, but it's Isaiah 40, and it's verses 25 through 31. I'm sorry, 21 through 31. Have you not been paying attention? Have you not been listening? Haven't you heard these stories all your life? Don't you understand the foundation of all things? God sits high above the round ball of earth. The people look like ants. He stretches out the skies like a canvas. Yes, like a tent canvas to live under. He ignores what all the princes do and say. The rulers of the earth count for nothing. Princes and rulers don't amount to much. Like seeds barely rooted, just sprouted. They shrivel when God blows on them. Like flecks of chaff, they're gone with the wind. So, who is like me? Who holds a candle to me, says the Holy. Look at the night skies. Who do you think made all this? Who marches this army of stars out each night, counts them off, calls each by name? so magnificent, so powerful, and never overlooks a single one. Why would you ever complain, Jacob, or whine, Israel, saying, God has lost track of me? He doesn't care what happens to me. Don't you know anything? Haven't you been listening? God doesn't come and go. God lasts. He's creator of all you can see or imagine. He doesn't get tired out, doesn't pause to catch his breath, and he knows everything, inside and out. He energizes those who get tired, gives fresh strength to dropouts. For even young people tire and drop out. Young folk in their prime stumble and fall. But those who wait upon God get fresh strength. They spread their wings and soar like eagles. They run and they don't get tired. They walk and they don't lag behind. May God praise the Lord for this reading. And the other reading is from Mark. And actually, I'm going to summarize it. This is when Jesus goes to Peter's house after healing some people. And he goes to Peter's house, and his mother-in-law is in the house, and she's very ill. It said she had a fever, and in Jesus' day, a fever could be just about anything, but a lot of time it meant malaria. And of course, back then they really didn't have very good treatment for malaria. So Jesus says, bring her here to me. And he just touches her. And she's immediately healed. And what does she do? She gets up and she waits on all the people. She serves all the people their meal. And I think that's amazing. That's her realizing Jesus did something for her. And she in turn turns around and does something for everybody else. But not only that, this is the Sabbath, and she's not supposed to be doing this kind of work. But she puts her devotion to Jesus ahead of whatever the rules are about Sabbath. So that's another little thing in that story about trusting God and moving with Him, letting Him take the lead in what you do. So, sorry about that. You have to know some history about, wait a minute, I'm discombobulated here. When I looked at Isaiah 40 and the reading in Mark, the word perception kept coming into my mind. So, perception is the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through your senses, a way of understanding or interpreting something, a mental impression, or maybe something intuitive that you understand or insight. So, one day in January of 2007, at the District of Columbia Metro Station, there was a very shabbily dressed young man with his violin case out, and he was playing. And he was playing 6 Bach violin pieces that lasted approximately 45 minutes. About 2,000 people passed by during that time. Some slowed down to listen. Most moved on because they saw what he looked like. Some threw money in his case. A lot of the children stopped because they thought the music was great. They stopped, they wanted to hear it, but their parents dragged them off. Come on, let's go. Well, after 1 hour, he had collected $32. And no one noticed that he had stopped playing. There was no applause, there was no recognition. The violinist was Joshua Bell, and he was one of the world-renowned violinists, and he had played one of the most intricate pieces that Bach had ever written. His violin was worth $3.5 million. 2 days before, he had played in Boston, and it was a sellout crowd, and people had paid at least $100 a seat. So these people's perception, because of their perception of this man, they missed the most wonderful music they could have ever heard. And don't we do that sometimes, miss something because of our perception? Now, the Israelites in Isaiah, they had been destroyed, completely destroyed, and they had been sent off to Babylon in captivity. They were hundreds of miles from their home. They were in a foreign land. Their temple had been destroyed. All their homes had been destroyed. Everything they had was gone. They heard that wild animals were roaming the streets back in Jerusalem, and they said to themselves, God has forgotten us. Well, you know why? We think that sometimes too. But really, in fact, we forget God. He never forgets us. So when you look at Deuteronomy, the end of Deuteronomy, Moses has been told by God, the Israelites are getting ready to go into the promised land. And here they are, they're whining, complaining people all the time. And God says to Moses, you know what? As soon as you get in the promised land, these people are going to forget everything I ever did for them. And Moses says, oh, this can't happen. This can't happen. So if you read the end of Deuteronomy, he has this long sermon reminding them of all the things that God has done for them, recapitulating everything that happened to them in the wilderness. Not only that, he writes a song and he makes them memorize the song and sing it back to him. And then, just for good measure, he had the scribes write the song on stones leading into the promised land. So when the Israelites passed by, they had to read this. And you know what happened as soon as they got in the promised land? Guess what? They forgot. They forgot all about God. And it just sounds funny, but that happens with us too. So Isaiah in this passage is trying to cure the amnesia of the Israelites. He's trying to remind them God really does reign over everything. He reigns over you. He loves you. He cares about you. Now, when Bob and I worked in the insurance industry, we had to investigate all kinds of auto accidents, malpractice, whatever. And there were always witnesses, hopefully, to these things. And it was amazing. You could have a bunch of witnesses to the same thing, but each one would have a different memory of that particular incident. And the reason for that was because everybody has something they focus on. We all have different focuses. So some person might look at what people are wearing. Another person might look at where are they sitting, where are they standing, where are they in the scheme of things. Another one might remember what they said after the accident happened. But each version that we got was unique. And that's because God created us each to be unique. So isn't that a miracle that there are so many people on earth, but God is so interested in us that he made us each unique? And I think sometimes we think that we can take God, and if we don't want him to see or hear what we're doing, we can put him in a bag or put him in a box, put him in our closet, and then he's gone. He's not there. We don't have to worry about him seeing that what we're doing that we shouldn't be doing. But we can't do that. That's such a small God. And Isaiah is saying, this is a huge God. This is a huge God. You cannot get rid of him. He's there all the time with you. So when we think about this perspective of God, perception of God, we have to remember that we have to trust God. And how we trust God is not by going helter-skelter. It's by a slow and steady pace. And I read about a lady, her name was Margaret Stevenson. She was in her 90s, Richard. And she walked 10 to 15 miles every day in the Smoky Mountains, every day of her life. And she was a legend. Everybody loved her and knew who she was. She knew every path, every flower, every tree. And she was climbing with a young man one day who was in his 20s. And how he liked to walk was he would like to surge. He would like to go really fast, and then he'd say, see you later, and he'd be on his way. Well, they got to this one incline, and she just kept going at her pace. And this guy took off, and when she got About a mile down the road, there he was on his back, panting because he couldn't breathe. And she took her cane and tapped him and said, "I'll see you at the top." So he learned a lesson about low and slow. And that's the thing about Jesus going low and slow. He goes to Peter's house and he reaches out for his mother-in-law to heal her because he has such compassion for her. And touch is a very important part of life. And when you go to assisted living facilities, do you realize that a lot of people have not been touched in months? I actually was in one time visiting a friend, and I noticed the lady was upset, and I went over and I said, "Can I hold your hand?" And she let me do that, and she said, "You're the first person who touched me, except for the person who gives me my pills since I've been here." Now isn't that an awful thought? That somebody has not had a human touch in all that time. And I think it's such a simple thing to just touch someone. And I also had a young minister, Reverend Joe, when I was a teenager. We thought he was really cool. He was young, he was not married. And he did a sermon series one time on the Peanuts comic strip. That's why we thought he was so cool. But we went to Christmas Carol, and it was at night. It was very dark. And we went to this lady's house. She lived in a big farm by herself. And when he went to go in to say hello to her, he said, "You guys keep singing. Don't stop." And he put sunglasses on. And we were all like, why did he put sunglasses on when it's night to go in and see her? So when he came back out, of course, we said, "Reverend Joe, why the sunglasses?" He said, "Well, she has cancer of the face. She has had no treatment. And I don't want her to see that I have to close my eyes when I visit with her." And what a compassionate man. And what a perception. What a perceptive man to do something like that. And I think that's God working in each one of us. Well, this church is named Asbury. That's after Francis Asbury. He was the first Methodist bishop in the United States. But before he became a bishop, he was just an ordinary, itinerant, traveling, circuit riding minister all over the place. And he was not your typical person that John Wesley would have chosen, because he was uneducated. He did not have a degree. He did know how to read and write, but he never went to college. He was not a good preacher. There were many people who preached a lot better than he did. He could not pick up the Bible and just pick out a phrase and preach on it. He was not that kind of guy. And most Methodist ministers were like that. And he came from a very bad background. His father was a drunkard. The saving grace was his mother, who introduced him to Methodism. And he was a very sickly person. He had headaches. He had depression, very bad depression. But people always took care of him wherever he went. Now, the other interesting thing about him is that he stayed in the United States during the Revolutionary War. All the other Methodist ministers left because John Wesley, in all his wisdom, wrote this horrible tract about how the colonists should not leave the British, how they should stay with Britain. And I mean, it was really not written very nicely toward the colonists. And Francis Asbury was like, oh, this is not good. So he went to Delaware and hid out there during the Revolutionary War so that he would not get killed. But these things that he wasn't good at, well, because he wasn't well educated, he could relate to everyday people. Because he was not a good preacher, but he was very good one-on-one. He was very good in small groups. He was very good negotiator. He could bring two sides together who were like this and meet them in the middle. Very, very good at that. He was good at evaluating people and situations. He was a visionary. He rode 130,000 miles on horseback, even though he was sick. He crossed the Allegheny Mountains about 60 times on horseback. He visited every state once a year, and he preached over 10,000 sermons, ordained 3,000 preachers. He was more recognized in the United States than Washington or Jefferson. And if a letter was addressed to Bishop Asbury, and that was it, they always got the letters to him. They knew exactly where he was. So you would think this guy thought very highly of himself because he was able to do all these things. But he always remained close to his parishioners. He had absolutely no money when he died. He just had great faith. He had humility, and he always put God first. He never forgot God, and he knew that God never forgot him. So as we move forward in our faith journey, may we remember God, have trust in him, and always reach out to others the way that God is always reaching out for us, because the perception that others have of us really matters. Amen.